Okay, so tonight we're going to discuss, as I mentioned, participating in online group discussions. I also forgot to mention, if you have a question, since we have a small group tonight, and like I mentioned earlier, if we have more students that do come into the room and it becomes a little bit more larger, I might ask you to raise your hand if you have a question. But under these circumstances, just put in the chat area if you have a question or a comment. And the other thing too is, don't wait to the end of the presentation. I'm fine if you ask during the presentation. Okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit about what the purpose of the group discussions are, some of the benefits and the challenges, some key points, some etiquette tips, some strategies, and then, any additional questions and answers that we might have at the end of the session. So before we begin, I kind of just, pose some questions here. So if you could just put in the chat area what you think, group discussions are important, or why you think group discussions are important, and I'll give you guys, a couple seconds or so to just kind of, put your thoughts there. And there's no right or wrong answer, by the way, but it does gauge, where you might or what you think about the discussions. Pamela, if you can hear, can you please just indicate, maybe with a check mark, that you can actually hear me? Pamela, I noticed that you just came into the room, so welcome. Okay, great. So we're just on this slide. We just began. So if you want to just answer that first question, or you don't have to. Why you think group discussions are important. Okay, so first of all, Radha, I have come to appreciate them because my fellow students have a variety of experiences that help us all in the learning process. Yes, that's absolutely correct. You share ideas, you check to see if I'm on the right track. Correct. Okay, that's important. And the other thing too is when somebody posts something and you kind of like you're scratching your head, it questions where you're going. You might be on the right track. That individual might also be on the right track but have a different perspective, or could be that one of you are really off track. And so it does make you think and go back and check the information. Kara says, I think they are important to increase learning among the students. Yes, it is. It's to have that interaction, is to, reinforce some of the things that you're reading or any of the videos that you're watching. It also allows you to test the waters, like Pat mentioned, to see if you're on the right track. Test the waters with a thought, say for instance, and get some feedback, which might, drive you in a more straighter path, say for instance. Welcome, Crystal. I just want to make sure, can you hear it? If you could select the green check mark to indicate so. Just want to make sure. Great. Okay, and if you want to participate, we're just beginning actually. All right, so the second question here is, you're welcome, Crystal, what is the most difficult part for you when participating in group discussions? So I'm making some assumptions that that most of you are in the September term and already fully engaged in your courses. If you're in November term and you're new to the term or new to the college, maybe what you think might be the most difficult part. Okay. So Diane mentions when everyone does not participate. Yes, that is very difficult, and we'll talk a little bit about that. The initial post, it feels like an additional written assignment. Yes. Yes, an initial post. I have to agree with you. Okay, Pamela, then that's okay. So if you want to share maybe some of the reservations, some of the concerns you have, go right ahead. We can address those. Kara, I find it difficult what to say, especially when I have to cite my response. Yes. So yes, that can be very challenging. We'll talk a little bit about that as well. But remember, yes, citing is important. Okay. And so we got a couple people typing. I'll just wait a minute and I'll go on to the next one. Sometimes I don't find a fellow student's post to respond to that I understand. Sometimes posts seem off topic slightly. Yes, they can, Pat. But you know something? Then don't respond. Maybe possibly you can put, place a post of yours. and then hopefully you get some responses. Or you could ask one of your classmates to clarify that you're not quite sure. And I know that that takes a little, it's putting you out there too for someone to think, well, gee, she doesn't get it. But that's okay. You're there to learn. And we'll go into some of the benefits, by the way, of being in an online discussion versus in a classroom. Rada says, sometimes there are too many responses to keep up with. I'm laughing because I'm in a graduate course, and oh my goodness, the discussions that are taking place in there, I wonder sometimes. It's like, oh my goodness, do we have to post that much? Yes, 87 posts in one discussion right now, that's a lot. Now, on the other hand, if you have 20 students that are very engaged, yeah, that can be quite a bit. So we'll talk a little bit about that, and if we don't, bring it back around so we do. I also find it difficult when I have to cite sources about the responses. Yeah. And we'll talk about that too. And again, if I missed that, let's bring that back, because especially when you respond, you don't want to respond with opinion or your gut. You really want to respond with something that's going to ground why you feel that way, or why you are arguing a different point or a perspective. Okay. My guess is probably the third point here. I mentioned most difficult. I would say your biggest concern. Some of these actually fall in that category, but if there's something else you want to share, that would be great. Yes. You want everyone to be respectful. And quite honestly, you just continue being respectful. If others are not, the instructor will address it. That behavior is, considered, misconduct. So some students kind of teeter on that line. Okay. All right, so let's go to then the next slide. So great responses, guys. So what do you think the purpose of the group discussions? She kind of said, in some cases you hit some of the points that I'm mentioning here, but, in a traditional college, what happens? You go, to a classroom, you sit, you have discussions, you interact, and you leave. Well, the same thing here, okay? It replaces the classroom environment, all right? The other thing, what it does is it gets you used to the online environment. Granted, it's an effective tool, but it does get you used to posting things, submitting things, so you are comfortable with the technology being used, to learn. Tracy, welcome. If you could select the green check mark to indicate that you can hear me, that would be great. Great, okay. So welcome. It also develops some challenges, your communication and writing skills. And as you know, as we've already mentioned, citing your sources, really thinking through, how you're going to respond, how that's going to come through. Somebody mentioned respect. Are your posts coming through respectful, or are they coming through as a little condescending? So it really definitely challenges you. It also will develop your skills quickly. Or at least identify the skills that you need to develop. And don't be afraid of that. Embrace that, because for some students this is a new way of learning. The other thing too is that, how are you going to connect with students if you don't go to a classroom? So the discussion is to connect, the students in that class that really have a common goal, common interest, which is that course. And of course, what it also does is the instructor, since you're not meeting face-to-face with the instructor needs to have at least an idea other than your written assignment. If you're really understanding, everybody can post something and take something out of a textbook and cite it, but do you really do you understand, the subject, all right? And the only way to understand that subject is really kind of reflect on the information, and then make some kind of connection, and then act on that information. So, the important citing is very useful, but you don't want to use word for word because the instructor wants to see if you do understand in your own words, all right? So, again, important. Give some insight. And then, of course, lastly, I think is important. You do have the ability to gain other perspectives and ideas, just like you were in a regular classroom. So Crystal says, I find it hard when I procrastinate and put the discussion off, and then I have to do it the last minute. Makes it stressful, but I guess that would be a personal problem. Well, Crystal, something? Let's address that for just a quick moment, and then we can address it again. Yeah, it is a personal problem as far as procrastination, but in some respects, you have to ask yourself, why are you procrastinating? You know, is it a difficult subject for you? Do you not feel comfortable with the subject? Are some of the posts intimidating? You know, you're not really sure how to respond to those? You know, that will all lead to procrastination. And so here might be my suggestion for that. All right, so the first day of the first week where the discussion board, you know, I don't know how your classes are, but mine are weekly. So I have to post, I can post any time during that 1 week, and that week starts Saturday. So my class ends Friday, and so Saturday starts the next week. Post that first day, all right, and get it out of the way, all right. I know that's scary because then you're kind of starting it off and you're kind of setting the tone, but at least if you put it out there, what's going to happen is now you put it out there, you're done with it, now you can watch if there's any responses or anybody else you know, posting, and then you might feel more comfortable actually responding and posting additional you know, ideas, perspectives. So maybe try to take that approach and get it out of the way, because I do understand that. You're right. Okay, thank you. Okay, so that is one strategy. Okay, so what are the benefits? I mean, I like the idea of online. Okay, granted you don't have that personal connection like you do in the classroom, but let's think about it. When you're in a classroom, if you think back to even high school, you know, or if you have taken college classes, you know, where you're called on, and you really don't want to be called on, especially if you're the one that sits in the back of the room and says, oh, geez, don't call on me, and you're called on, you know, you have to think right there and then. And that's stressful in itself, just right there. So in the online, you really have the time to kind of think about how you want to respond. That's a huge advantage, by the way. So if you look at it that way, and I don't know how you all construct your posts, but this would be a suggestion that I would do, is open up your word processing sheet, okay, and start typing, you know, when your first week comes up and you know what you have to post about, okay, you know, maybe about a reading, about a question, how you're going to respond to a question, whatever it might be, the assignment for the posting. When you start reading some of your assignments, you know, either have a notepad or have something next to you where you're just jotting down, maybe informing how you want to post, what you want to post, okay? And then you're formulating at that point. Then you can kind of go back and then tightening it up, okay? And as you're formulating, by the way, you can also put the page numbers, okay, down of where you formulated that idea from. So if it's your textbook and you know it's on page 150, you know, second paragraph, you don't have to go try to search it after you've already you know, wrote it down. You've already written down where exactly you can find that information. So then the citing is much easier, okay? So Kara said, I find that when I start my post early, it's not as overwhelming. Exactly. So if you get that out of the way, you know, by the way, if you get out of the way, there's an advantage too. And I shouldn't say get it out of the way, but at least if you start and you do it, you will find that some of that information and the interaction that you're having is going to help you with the written assignment. So it's going to allow you to hone in on maybe different perspectives, ideas, maybe things that you didn't even think about. It might make you go back to some of the readings because you're scratching your head, you're not quite sure what this person is saying, and oh, by the way, that's going to help you with your writing, your written assignment. So there's definitely some benefits. Diane says, I like the flexibility, just had knee surgery, oh my goodness, hope you're doing well. I would not be able to leave home to go to school. Yes, so there's definitely a benefit there from a flexibility standpoint. It allows you to continue your schoolwork anywhere. I mean, literally anywhere. As long as you have a computer, you're golden. Well, good. I'm glad to hear that. The other thing too is it allows you in the online environment is not to react. Okay, so think about that. You know, if somebody's posted something, say, disrespectful, okay, or you're not really quite liking how they responded to your post, they were still respectful, but you really do strongly disagree, it does allow you to reflect before you react. Okay, so that's huge. All right. The next one, Crystal, I wish we could have a system like Illuminate Live for our online classes. That would be awesome, and also be nice if we could see our professor actually teach the class like our Skyper here. You know, Crystal, hopefully as time goes on, I think we're a little behind when it comes to some of the technology. I know some of the language classes use Illuminate. I know some of the other courses use Illuminate, in some cases Skype. I think Angel is a rigid system, so some of these things are difficult to use. However, I think you're going to see some changes. For instance, my grad study program, which is at Empire State College, right now, the way they're conducting, it's not necessarily a class, but the program itself, they're using Google Docs, using Google Workshops, you know, Illuminate, Second Life, where we had to all meet and listen to a presentation. So I think you'll see some of this eventually come in. I think what the challenges are, Crystal, and the reason why, and I'll get off this in a minute, is that not every student has the ability to download Illuminate, and technology for some students is not accessible, and Empire State College is all about accessibility. So I think there's just some challenges there. But you know, you might want to share that and continue sharing that with the college. And then Pat said I had a course last semester that went live 2 nights a week, which is great. You're welcome, Crystal. Okay, so the other thing is the barriers, okay? It does remove the barriers. So if you're that person that really truly likes to sit in the back of the classroom and doesn't like to be put on the spot, or is, you know, one that just likes to take it all in first, okay, and then reflect on it and then respond, this is a perfect environment for you, okay? The other thing too is that, and you know, you might laugh, but you know, in a classroom, everybody's checking everybody out, right? You know, everybody, we're human, you know, so as someone's talking, we're really not necessarily listening. We are or we're not. Our eyes are moving everywhere. We're, you know, all of our senses are alive. And so that puts a lot of pressure on the person that was chosen by the instructor to come up and share what they're talking about, because that student's going to feel that, all right? It removes the barriers, okay? And of course, lastly, it does allow you to work at your own pace, okay, in an environment that you're comfortable in, as long as obviously you meet your deadlines, because, you know, you can't let you take the class forever, right? Okay, so challenges. Yes, you know, you mentioned, you know, it would be nice to see the professor so you can make that connection. I agree. You know, so it is challenging because really your connection is through the online discussions, through email. If you, you know, benefit, I mean, if you know, you have Illuminate, that's even better because you can at least hear a voice, maybe not necessarily an image. So, you know, writing is your main vehicle, okay, to communicate and connect with your instructor. We've already really talked about, you know, you're really putting yourself out there. But again, think about that traditional classroom where you really were putting yourself out here. You are putting yourself out there, especially if you're putting that first post, but there's also some benefits what we just discussed. And of course the challenge is if your writing ability and your skills are a little less than you think, you know, they're a little rusty, you know, there are going to be some students that will call you out on a couple things, and the instructor will call you up on this. So that's a challenge as well. So my suggestion, I think I have some strategies and some resources if you're unsure and you really need to practice those. You know, pay attention to your posts. Make sure they're written and not written like you would text, or, you know, that you're using, you know, proper grammar, punctuation, so on and so forth. Just do the best you possibly can, okay? Now, of course, the challenge is accountability, all right, and managing your time. No one's going to chase you down. You know, you have to get in there and you have to do those discussions. And then, of course, how often participate in following the threads. How often to participate, just want to make sure I'm not getting ahead of myself with that one. So just give me a minute here. Yeah. Well, it's always good to repeat it anyways. How often participate should be listed in your course expectations, okay? You do not have to be in your course 7 days a week. Expectations typically, or at least 2 days, or at least 2 to 3 days that you're responding to at least 2 students, posting your own, and then responding to those students that responded to your post, okay? And then of course, if you're You've selected 2 students and you've posted something to them and they've responded, you are to keep up that engagement, okay? And then following the threads, yes, can be very confusing, okay? So my suggestion with the threads is just make sure that you follow the threads, that you go in and you look at everything. The other thing too is, I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but you can subscribe, especially in the discussion area, and I believe it's on the right-hand side, where it lists all of the discussion boards, you know, for Module 1, Module 2, so on and so forth. And I believe there's a subscribe. It's highlighted in blue. If you subscribe and you've got an email account, which I believe you all should, and if you've got a smartphone or whatever, it will alert you and show you the post that somebody posted, okay, on your smartphone. So what that does, I use it. What that does, it alerts me that, okay, you know, there's been, you know, some interaction that's taking place on the discussion board. I probably should check it out. Now that could drive you crazy, by the way. Doesn't mean you have to go to the discussion board and start those discussions, but at least it gives you an alert and keeps you kind of engaged. Yeah, Rod, I mean, my guess is a lot of people are not aware of that. And yet it's definitely helpful. I like the threads that I post to, make it easier to go back and check. That's actually excellent, Pat. Very, very good. Okay. Crystal, so do we have to participate twice a week up until the time the assignment is due? So if it is 9/26 and the discussion response is due 10/21, let's see here, then do I have to participate in the same once or twice a week? You know, Crystal, you have to go back and look at your expectations. I don't know what the expectations are. Typically, the discussion board is open from the time of the module, so sometimes modules are 2 or 3 weeks long, sometimes just 2 weeks, and so the instructor is going to expect you to participate over the 2-week period, okay? But again, they might just say, you know, just make sure that you meet, you know, the expectations, and if you do it over the 2-week period, that's fine, that you've responded to 2 people, and that you've posted your own, and that you continue to respond to any responses that you're receiving. Now that doesn't say that you go and do that and then you just never, you know, enter the discussion area again, because quite honestly, even if you're not responding and no one's responding to you, you still want to be somewhat engaged, by the way, because you want to read those posts because they are going to increase and reinforce the knowledge, okay, that you're learning in the course, okay? So I think also, I don't think it means, you know, respond this week twice and then the following week twice. So again, go back to the expectations. I think they'll clearly state it. And if you're confused about that, just ask the instructor. It does. It did it with a wiki and became consuming. Yes, it does. Okay, so Rhoda, definitely check with your instructor's directions. I had one class that we had to respond at least 10 times a week to get an A. Most classes I could just post 2 responses and get an A. Yeah, it depends on it really, really depends on the class. And typically the average is 2 to 3, okay? If it's 10 times a week, you know, I don't know what that subject was, but it doesn't surprise me. Sometimes, by the way, your discussions, like I had a course, it was an ethics course. The first week, nothing was open, you were to read. The second week, discussions opened up, you had 1 week, and you had to meet those expectations, and then the discussion closed. So I couldn't go back. So if I didn't do what was expected of me, I got a 0, okay, for the discussion part of that assignment or that week. And then the third week is where I posted or I submitted my paper. So just make sure you know how they operate. I know that's a lot to remember, but if you've printed off the expectations and you look at what's expected to you from class to class, that will help. Okay, so that's some key points, okay? And think about this, you know, when you're posting, okay? And it's called write. Imagine that. So warmth, you know, remember who's on the other side. Even though you can't see that person, you can't touch that person, you know, you can't look them in the eye, they're still a human, okay? And just think about that you don't want to receive something on the other side that's not, again, respectful, somewhat warm, okay? The next one is responsive. if someone's posting to your posting, or you responded to someone and then they responded back to you, the respectful thing is, quite honestly, is to be engaged with that student. So don't ignore that student. If you want to ignore that student, you have to ask yourself why. You know, are you unclear of how to respond to the student, or you're not quite sure what the student is asking? It's okay to say, you know, can you clarify? I'm not really quite sure what you're asking. You know, I apologize, you know, whatever. I'm, you know, I'm missing the point. Can you, you know, again, clarify? And of course, the next one that goes to the point that I just made is ask questions, okay, instead of statements. And so, you know, I'm trying to give a good example of what I mean by that. Like, for instance, some people become defensive when someone makes a statement, okay? So, you know, think about a situation where you have said something or posted something and somebody comes back with a statement that sounds like that they're kind of saying you're wrong, okay? Rather than ask a question so they can come and understand what where you're coming from. So it's really important to not be so rigid in this area. So Tracy says, I had one class where the expectation was 2 to 3, and to get an A you needed to do 5 to 6. Okay. I did up to 17 and got high B, low A. Despite having met all criteria, both resources and correct grammar, it is frustrating, and when I asked, I was brushed off. This is why I signed up for this webinar. You know, it's difficult. I don't know how anybody, quite honestly, could say you're going to get an A if you do X amount of posts. I think that how you posted, and like you mentioned, you said that, you know, you met all the criteria for resources and correct grammar, but I'm wondering if you also looked at the depth and the breadth and the broadness of your posts and really felt that it just slightly missed that A. You know, I know that's kind of difficult. So I guess my point as far as that is concerned, if you're meeting the criteria, make sure that when you post, your posts are meaningful and that they're going to count, okay? And that you are displaying and demonstrating that you understand, okay, what you're learning, okay, instead of maybe restating something, because really what it comes down to, everybody can restate and memorize, right? But really truly understanding means more. So if you can give examples of how it relates or something to your life, say for instance, that will make the connection. So hopefully that helps, and I do understand that frustration. Okay, so inquisitiveness. Okay, so I guess, you know, listen, okay? And listen, really, what I mean by that is really read what someone is saying. Instead of really jumping to the conclusion that they're really meaning this. If you're really not sure what they mean, again, ask questions. You're welcome, Tracy. Okay, so tentativeness. Really, it's to reduce unhealthy and unnecessary arguments. So it appears, rather, it is, okay? It is, okay, is a little bit different than it appears, or from what I understand, you know, try to phrase it slightly different when you're responding to somebody. And then, of course, empathy. You know, we talked about this on the warmth side. You know, put yourself on the other side. You know, your audience. Remember who your audience is, okay? Remember how your tone comes across in an email, okay, as well as in a posting. You know, you ask yourself, do you think they're going to be offended? Now, this gets a little tricky, okay, when you're in a class where I can think of a couple classes where passions run very, very, very deep on a particular topic, especially some of the images of women in the Western civilization, some of the ethic courses. They do get somewhat heated. However, if you can ground, especially like in ethics, you've got a lot of theories, and I think the images of Western women in Western civilization, the same thing. If you can ground those, okay, and have a healthy disagreement with a student, that's okay. Because what that does is, again, reinforces the theories, your understanding Hi, everybody. Can you still hear me? I got somehow disconnected. Okay, good. My apologies. I don't know what happened. Completely cut off there, so I'm not even sure what you missed. Okay. All right. Did you hear what I said as far as you know, posting in the discussions and having basically a healthy disagreement? Did you all hear that? Okay, good. All right, then I won't repeat it. Okay, thank you. All right, so let's go on to some other key points. Okay. A lot of this comes down to, by the way, is communication. Okay, so for instance, you know, if you're really unsure of any of the expectations, and a lot of questions about, you know, what the expectations are for discussion, really your instructor is the best person to talk to. You know, send that, you know, your professor an email, whoever they like to be contacted by. I really think that's important. Otherwise, you're going to be in the dark, and you really don't want to get a bad grade because you didn't understand the expectations. The other part I want to make here is somebody mentioned, you know, the discussions need to be respectful. If you really feel someone is being disrespectful and you think they've kind of crossed the line, and, you know, honestly, this has happened, you know, especially on certain, again, in certain subjects, students get really very, very personal, especially if the topic that they're talking about is, you know, a touchy one. The whole point of, you know, obviously discussing some of those touchy subjects, you know, is to really broaden everybody's perspective, you know. I mean, you've heard the whole saying, you know, when you go out in a social event, don't talk about politics, religion, and so on and so forth. You know, well, I guess it can get heated, right? And people can be insulting. So if you feel that that is actually happening, you've got one or two choices. You could send the student an email saying, you know, hey, I'm sorry if you're feeling this way, but it's really unnecessary for you to use such and such a language. Or you can just contact the instructor. So just know you do have that option. We've already mentioned this. Your sources, you have to cite your sources, and you got to use the correct format. And the format is also listed in the expectations. It's usually on that first I think that's that first welcome, your course schedule, and course expectations. It will tell you what the style, is required. So it could be APA, MLA, Chicago, whatever it might be. Make sure you're aware how to use or format your sightings, okay? And then again, the etiquette rules. And of course, we're going to go right into that slide, what that means. I'm not going to hit all of these, but I think some of these we already know. You probably already know this, but it's net etiquette, okay? So etiquette, net, okay? It's for really online and really for emails, you know, because of technology and where we are today on how we communicate. Obviously, text messaging, I don't have to say this. I hope I don't have to say this. Don't use shortcuts, okay, please. You'll definitely get a failing grade if you start using shortcuts in your posts and as well as in your written assignments. They don't go over very well. And of course, in today's technology, really check for your typos, your spelling errors, incomplete sentences. You know, read it aloud, too, by the way. Incomplete sentences really scream out, okay, when you read them out loud. And as far as the spelling errors, you got a word check. Don't do your work in Angel. Do your work in Word or in some type of a word processor, because you can save it, you can check it. And then, you know, tighten it up. Caps, we know what caps are. Caps are perceived as yelling. So try not to use caps for your entire post. If you have to use caps to maybe highlight, you know, a specific word, that's okay, but don't use it for the entire post or your written assignment. Okay, if you have a word, it can read your work back to you. Oh, really? Okay. I did not know that, Tracy. I've never used that feature. I'm not surprised, though. Obviously, in postings, you know, especially if you're trying to make a connection, be careful about sharing too much personal information about yourself, unless you really kind of don't care, but there's a fine line there as well. All right, so be careful how much you are sharing, because your instructor is going to see this. Other students are going to see this. If you need to make a point, maybe make a point around maybe possibly your experience, or if you do, maybe just kind of tone that experience down. Unless, of course, the type of class is asking you to share some of those experiences. Inappropriate information, obviously, what you did the night before and in detail, or something else, is probably not appropriate. And the other thing too, think about this too, don't call somebody out in front of the classroom. You wouldn't do that in person. Don't do that in a discussion area either, okay? Okay. So here are some strategies. And they might seem to be, pretty logical, but a lot of students do miss some of these points. If you're in the September term and you're really not sure, okay, again, I keep saying this, understanding what's expected, okay? Go back to the expectations and read those expectations again. If you've got somebody who's posting, 20 posts, obviously they're over and beyond the expectation. Don't think you have to, post 20 posts, okay? Make sure you know about the style that is going to be required to cite your sources both in the posting as well as your written, okay? If it's APA, it's going to be for both, by the way. Ground your information. That really comes from sources, any of the resources that you have found. If it's your textbook, use some information. If it's a theory, okay, make sure that you're staying within the framework of that theory. And then of course, use words. Use word. Oh, okay. I mentioned word processor, okay, to develop your responses. It does allow you to type that, save it, come back, reflect, look at it again, especially if it's a difficult assignment for that discussion week, or if you're trying to respond to a student and you're really having a difficult time how you want to respond. It's always very good to do it outside of Angel. So you do have that time to reflect and have time to actually tighten up your response, okay? The other thing too is I want to make a point is some of the discussions, some of the expectations, and again, I keep going back to my grad class, 2 to 3 paragraphs, period. Okay, now she didn't indicate how long those paragraphs can be, but, so there was limitation of how long my discussion post could be. Again, I mentioned don't react. If you feel you want to react, my best advice is go react on the word processor. Go type what you really, really, really are thinking. Just make sure you don't use it when you put in Angel. But get it out, okay, so then you can come back and now you've released it, and now you can actually look at it in a different view through a different lens. So if you really feel you need to react, in another fashion. And of course, I mentioned, listen. That's a huge thing. Granted, you can't hear with your ears, but believe it or not, if you really read posts, they tell a lot about a person. How a person is actually, the vocabulary that they're using, the style in which they're writing, how they start off, okay, their post, how they end their post, how they're responding to other classmates, what they're responding to. So those are all little cues, by the way, that will help you respond to those students. And of course, lastly, I mentioned the schedule. You really should know, again, if you're taking more than one course, when you have to respond in the discussions, what, again, is expected. Again, unless this has changed, I have not seen where it is expected that you're in there 7 days a week. Now, if you have the time to do that, then go right ahead, okay? All right, so that's all I have, okay? Now, I've mentioned, I've got a little cheat sheet here, and I've mentioned some resources. So we can go to those resources in a moment if you like. But I want to make sure, I want to make sure I actually touched on some of the comments we made earlier. So if you have any questions, go right ahead or comments. I'm going to just scroll through the chat to make sure that I didn't miss something. I think I did. The citing is a big thing, unfortunately, and I know that you wish you could just, when you're in a traditional classroom, you don't have to cite the source, but sometimes you can refer to the source. I read in our textbook, blah, 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 and it was, the theory stated this, and so on and so forth. You're kind of doing the same thing when you're in the classroom. So here you're just actually just typing it out. Okay, so Kara, sometimes I find that my responses are repetitive to the initial post. Maybe it is because we are reading the same text. It is. So if you think it's repetitive, I guess I would ask, are you building upon the repetitiveness? So, or are you using the same example? And so if you're using the same example or you're using the same view, it's possible that, I would suggest trying to look at it slightly different, or maybe use some, maybe a different approach. Again, not knowing what the topic is and not reading some of your posts, it would be difficult to say, but maybe looking at it slightly different and trying to respond to it slightly different. Maybe, again, building on what you've already posted before, but showing that you understand it, and that's how you're building upon the previous post. So Kara says it is difficult more when agreeing because there is only so many ways to say something. Yeah, I want to come back. Well, I'll come back to you, Crystal, in a minute. Interesting. What does the instructor say about that, by the way? Because I know some of the classes I've been in, they don't want you agreeing. They want you to challenge it, or they want you to build upon what another student has stated. So, for instance, I'm learning about cognitive load theory, okay, and there's so many aspects of cognitive load theory, and many of the students are talking about it in this manner, and other students are talking about it this manner, and I find myself always coming to the same, I guess, response, but I'm also watching other people's responses, and some of them are very, very repetitive, and they're saying, oh yeah, great response, oh yeah, I thought the same thing, oh by the way, yada da. The instructor came in and said, the great discussion, however, okay, I like to see the discussions, in so many words, you're not challenging each other enough, all right? So that's what I would suggest. So Crystal, do you have any suggestions of balancing work? I take 3 online classes, and it's a lot to stay on track between all the discussions, readings, responses, essay quizzes, Aplia, reading. Aplia, my guess is that is calculus or algebra. I can't remember which one, or discrete math. And then Crystal says, oh wow, I never thought to challenge it. I just always find people I agree with and state why I agree. Well, think about it. How can you expand your understanding of the information if you don't take the other side, right? So let me give you an example, okay? Had a student that was taking an ethics course, business ethics course, by the way, and one of the case studies that they had to review, and I don't know if any of you are in a business ethics course, but one of the case studies was the Ford Pinto story. I don't know if you were all aware of that, but back I think in the 70s, Pinto or Ford built this car knowing that on impact it would explode, okay, and start on fire. And again, they knew this, and they decided to go through with production anyways. And the reason why they decided to go through production is because they did a financial analysis or a business analysis on, and I'm not using the right terminology, let me just see here, but they did an analysis saying, okay, if in fact we do build this, we can be certain that there are going to be explosions and fires and deaths. And so those deaths are going to cost us X amount of money in lawsuits versus if we stop production, okay, and we lose these sales. And so based on that, they decided that they were willing to take the risk and willing that it was worth losing X amount of lives. Now, if you're in that business ethic course, and the instructor asks, you know, what side are you going to, more or less what side, what basically points are you going to take to support one way or the other? So what do you think the easiest thing to do is? Obviously, is to argue against the fact that, you know, Ford was unethical, and that I'm going to choose this particular theory that is going to support my argument that they were unethical, right? I mean, it's an obvious thing, because from a point of view as a human, oh my gosh, you know, how could you possibly build a business model on the fact that you know certain people are going to die, and it came down to you losing money, okay, over a human life? This particular student chose the opposite, knowing, okay, that it was going to be a very difficult sale, and that that student was going to get bombarded by his other peers in the class. And that's exactly what happened. However, okay, that student, it's a challenge actually, because now he's supporting Ford's decision to build the Pinto, okay, and really supporting the fact that, you know, it's okay to lose lives. And so built the theory in his argument, okay, for Ford, which was excellent, all right, because he grounded it with the right theory, okay. Other students, however, had a really difficult time challenging, okay, that student's theory, because they allowed their own personal feelings come into it instead of using a theory, which is really challenging and stretching, okay, their understanding of. Doesn't mean you have to agree, okay, by the way. You can have a disagreement, okay, just don't make it personal. That makes sense? Okay, good. So look at it that way. You know, the easier path, by the way, is to agree. You know, and you ask yourself, do you really agree with what they have to say, or is there something else you really want to put out there? All right. You know, the other thing too, it's difficult when the instructor is asking you, and I'll get back to you, Crystal, in a minute. When the instructor is asking you to select, like for instance, you know, I hate to come back, but I'll give you an example. Again, I'm in grad school, and we have to take, you know, I have to select a student and analyze their presentation. And you know, the easiest thing for me to do, again, if I wanted to, is select the presentation that I like the most. Or I could select the presentation which I found very confusing, I didn't understand it, and quite honestly, did not like it. And I can't say that, right? So I have to use the theories, okay, that have been presented to me to kind of state, you know, why this was a good presentation and why this one, in my opinion, was a bad presentation, but I can ground it. That's difficult, by the way. Personally, I like to select things that reflect poorly. So I've already selected the presentation I want to analyze, and I know why I want to analyze it, because to me it's pretty easy what was missed. So that kind of stretches my understanding of what I am learning, okay, because the other way is too easy. So I guess look at it that way, all right? So I know I'm going on that, but I really, truly, truly believe that that really enhances your learning and really broadens it and brings it to another level. All right, Crystal, that's a tough one. 3 online courses, you know, discussions or readings and so on and so forth. This is my best advice to you. If you're not using a calendar, okay, or if you're not using some kind of a tool to keep track of not just your classwork, by the way. I don't know if you have any other things, any other commitments outside of education, outside your courses, that you know where you have to be, you know, Sunday through Saturday. If you have children, or if you have parents you have to take care of, or if you've got work and you've got meetings, you've got to travel, whatever it might be. If you have a calendar that indicates, you know, where you got to be, and then you post on there, or you know, put, okay, this class, you know, this is due and this is due and this is due. Okay, I would do that first, and I would review that depending how busy you are. And I know a lot of you have taken my time management workshop. I have 3 calendars. I know that sounds ridiculous, but I do. It works for me, doesn't work for everybody else. So I review those calendars like daily, and the reason being is that I'm so busy that if I put it on one calendar, quite honestly, I won't be able to read it. And that's pretty pathetic, isn't it? But so if I kind of cross-reference them is what I do, but I look at them on a weekly basis. Excuse me, on a daily basis. And I also look ahead, so then I know what's coming up. And if something comes up that's not on the calendar, I can at least quickly go and go, okay, that's not going to work, or I can move something. So if I have a discussion or if I have a response or an essay that's due on this date, and now something has come up that I really can't get out of, you can look and go, okay, instead of working on this day, I'm going to have to work it on this day, can I? So you do some rearrangement there. The other thing too is when it comes to let's just say readings and stuff, I take full advantage of any time that I have. And this is a bad thing too. Everybody needs a little downtime. And by the way, listen to your body and listen to yourself if in fact you do need some downtime. When I am at a doctor's office, or I'm sitting at the bus stop, or I'm at a basketball practice, or I'm at swim practice, wherever I might be, even if it's 10-15 minutes, okay, I do a couple things. I do one, if I can't read in 15 minutes, okay, if I only have 15 minutes, I'll look at my calendar, okay, or what I'll do is I'll pull out my assignments and start looking at them and go, oh, okay, all right, okay, good. That's good, Crystal. But look at the opportunities where you can kind of plug in some of the readings even. If you know you have a half hour, I wouldn't pull out, obviously, your math textbook unless you're really comfortable reading your math textbook. But if you've got, I don't know if you're taking a history or whatever, and you've got some chapters, read those during that time. And always have a notebook and your assignment next to you, and just write down just thoughts, okay, that relate to how you're going to respond to that particular question in the page number, and again, where it came from. It does make you're organizing all that stuff. So when you actually do sit down at that computer, you can kind of pull all that stuff together. Now if you have a laptop, even better, pull that out, make notes, and save it. So hopefully that helps. That's just a couple tips. If anybody else has any suggestions, please. So Kara says, can I add something that also helps me? I do what you say and take notes while reading, and I will save some points to add to responses of post, instead of putting all the info in my own initial. Excellent idea, Kara, because you do want to save it. You don't want to put everything that you're going to put in your written assignment. So maybe put, like you said, parts of it and put it in your posting. Excellent idea. So what else? Before I'm just going to show you, we've got 5 minutes. So let me go through some of the resources that are available for you, okay? And I'm just going to pull these up, and maybe you all know, but just in case if you don't. So Radha says, it helps to review the discussion questions and assignments before you do the reading. Absolutely. Okay, I totally agree with you. Please do not just start reading, okay, before you know what the assignment is. And here's a tip too. Now, before I even, how many of you read the, if you've got like 4 chapters to do and you've got 3 courses, how many read from the first chapter to the end? Like just read all the way through. Just raise your hand or check. Okay, so Pat basically reads word for word right from the beginning to the end. And so does Radha. Okay, anybody else? And you do, Crystal, too. Okay. I wouldn't do that. Okay, and the reason why I would not do that is sometimes it's not necessary. And so if you know what the assignment is, okay, and the instructor wants you to read chapters 1 through 4, all right, and let's just say it's even a topic you're comfortable with, you don't necessarily have to read the entire, all 4 chapters. Look at what chapter, okay, is covering, okay. And some courses will say, pick, question 1, 2, or 3 and write your written essay, or it might be just do this. Okay, 1, this is your question. You don't have an option. I know some of the history courses give you actually a couple options, and then you can select it, which means that you don't necessarily have to read everything because it's not going to apply. All right, and it's not going to probably apply to anything else going forward. So you got to be careful of that. But I would look at the chapter titles. I would peruse, okay, the chapter to see what is highlighted, okay, and I would do that for each chapter. I would also look in the index, okay, and if in fact it's a terminology or whatever, find out what other pages that information is on. What it does is you're doing kind of a summary. You know, look at the table of contents. You know, some books, you know, especially like, for instance, Human Nutrition, you know, to read that from cover to cover, oh my goodness, okay, it's not necessary. So, you know, if you've got an assignment in Human Nutrition that's asking about the digestive system, you know, that's in one chapter. It's not in the 4 other chapters, by the way. Okay, and the other thing too is you can go to the back of the book and find out where digestive system is and go to that book or those pages. So, yes, Crystal. So Rada says, I just learned how to do this. It's my 4th year and finally figured it out. Because you know why? We were taught, okay, to read from cover to cover. And honestly, some of that stuff just doesn't apply. Some of it, yes, can be reinforced. You can always go back and read it, by the way. If after you've kind of perused it a little bit, you can go back and look at it and see if you've missed some points in those other chapters. So Crystal said that's a great idea because I feel like I read so much that I can't even take it all in. And by the end of the time, and by the time I'm done reading a chapter, I can barely remember it. Yeah, exactly. So the other thing too is if you don't have a notepad and you don't know what the assignment is, it's really hard to remember how you're going to even apply what you just learned to that assignment. So yeah, take a different strategy, okay, to reading. I think you'll find that a little bit easier, okay, to manage. Tracy says that's what I do. I go back and attempt to read the rest of the assignment. Exactly. So, you know, after you formulate, you know, your response and everything else, then you can kind of go back, especially if you have a little time to read and fill in, okay, with the information. So I'm glad that actually helps. By the way, it's not easy either, Crystal, if you're not used to doing that. So just make sure you're not missing some really important chapters, because some chapters, like for instance, again, you know, I know some courses, you know, they'll tell you to read chapter, there's one in particular in mine, they'll tell you to read chapter, you know, 10 through 13, and chapter 12 and 13 are like, they have nothing to do with the assignment, okay? So. All right, so let's just look at this real quick and I'll wrap it up at 7 o'clock. If you're not aware of the Learning Support tab, which is under My ESC, I'm just going to bring it up and then I'm going to push it to the chat area. I would click on that link and bookmark it. This is where you're going to find all of your support, a lot of the resources, a link to the library, information about how to cite your sources. There's also live workshops that take place from 6:30 to 8 o'clock. Okay, and citing is covered in most cases. How to do some research, okay, and do it effectively. They cover that. There's additional resources also available. So for instance, you know, if you want more information about academic reading, okay, we just talked about that. Go here and it gives you techniques and study strategies, right, to help you read academic material efficiently and effectively. And then we've got critical skills and so on and so forth, note-taking, time management, and you know, lots of things here. And of course, you know, you all here in the workshop tonight for the CDL unit, but there's also other workshops that are available that I conduct, so you can go to this area and see what's available. The other thing I want to make a point is if you're next to or close to one of our centers across the state, you're welcome to go to their workshops too, by the way. So if you're a CDL student, it doesn't make a difference. If you are a center student, you know, a Saratoga or a Latham center student, it doesn't make a difference. The services that are offered by the college are available to everybody. Okay, and in some cases, I know Latham does some online workshops. You can attend those as well. Raha says she wants me to add one more thing. You don't have to respond to every discussion post. No, you do not. I learned this after about 2 semesters, figured out what is required. Right now there are 87 posts in my classes, but my 12th week we will be lucky if there are 4 people responding, so don't overwhelm yourself in the beginning. Yeah, I wouldn't overwhelm yourself either, and someone also mentioned that was the other thing, when the discussions are barely happening, you know, that the instructor needs to get in there and start, you know, rattling some of the students to get some discussions going. I've seen classes where there's no discussions at all, which is unfortunate, by the way. And in that case, you can touch base with the instructor and say, there's no discussions here. We're supposed to meet these expectations. How am I going to meet these expectations if no one's posting? So anyway, Smart Thinking, if you're not on Smart Thinking, get to Smart Thinking. That's a great tutoring service. It's online. You can also submit your papers, and they will return those within 24 hours. Peak times, it takes a little longer. They will provide you feedback. They do not edit your paper. The feedback that you provide, that they provide, is to develop your paper so it's a stronger paper. They will, if I'm not mistaken, make some notes about citing as well as some punctuation. Or they might say, like, for instance, your thesis could be a little stronger. Did you think about this? All right, that type of stuff. The other thing, too, is if you need a peer tutor. If you're struggling in class and you're really not sure, unclear about some of the content, if I have a peer tutor, and I'm the one that oversees this, I will see if I can connect you. And a peer tutor is really a student that has taken the class that was very successful. So you would go to this website, and I am going to push that one out. And it gives you some information. This is in the works, too, so you're going to find some clunky information here, so I apologize. But we are kind of updating this. It's a little outdated in a sense that it needs to reflect some of the other programs. Yes, thank you, and I'm glad they did. I have some great tutors. Smart Thinking I mentioned. Writing coach, if you feel that you need some developmental writing assistance where Smart Thinking is really not helping, like for instance you struggle with really constructing a a clear, concise sentence, we do have writing coaches that can help you. That will come through me. If you feel that you're having difficulties kind of just navigating in general, want someone to help you with time management, organization, navigating Angel, whatever it might be, we have academic coaches. That all comes through me as well. And then of course I mentioned the library. Hopefully you guys all know about the library, but I'm just going to put it out there anyways. This is a great resource, and I also think it's underutilized. I pushed that link out. Tonight, let me see here, Ask a Librarian. They're not, are they available tonight? Let's see here. Okay, this is different. Typically there's a green light that indicates that someone is online, live at the library, just like if you were to walk in a library. Librarian is available. So if you're struggling trying to find something and you're not really really hitting the keywords, the librarian can help you, all right? So I would definitely get yourself familiar with this particular website. And let's see here. I also, here's contact information from my office as well as my own personal email and phone number. And then one other site I want to put out here because a lot of students are not aware of this, and I think this is a wonderful site. Hopefully it comes up quicker. Okay, there we go. Oh, maybe it isn't. So let's see here. Oh, it is. Good. Okay. It's Khan Academy. And the reason why I bring this one up is that lots of categories. It covers math, science, finance and economics, humanities. These are very down and dirty videos, 2 to 3 minutes, 4 minutes, basics, okay, and they build upon basics. So for instance, statistics, it has, deviated standard deviation, it goes through binomials and all that type of stuff. And see, Rada says she loves this site. Yes, it really helps both with stats and corporate finance. So I would really just visit it. And the other thing, too, is this practice your skills. So it does allow you to actually practice your skills, okay, and develop some of those skills, okay? I don't know why that wouldn't let me go there. But anyways, check it out. It's well worth it. Bill Gates is supporting this, just to let you know. So there's lots of money that's going into this site. They have well over 3,400 videos, and they're all free. So, we're over the time. I can stay here for a couple more minutes if you have any other questions. Oh, really, Tracy? I didn't know that about the free app, but I'm not surprised. Of course it would. Yeah, it's an amazing site. I don't know why this was not developed a long time ago, but it really has helped a lot of students. And it's funny, my daughter uses this site as well, and they're starting to incorporate this into the middle schools. Crystal, you're welcome. I'm glad. If you have any questions, anybody, okay, please feel free to give me a call or email me. I will be honest, I'm running a couple days behind in email responses just because I've been in meetings for the last 4 days, but I do my best to get back to you. So if I don't, just pester me, okay? Is it just a no, it's not, Pat. There's humanities out there, there's sciences, there's I don't think there's any writing if you're looking for anything that was related there. Biology, I'm not sure if there's any languages out there, Pat. Just check it out, but it's not all math related, no. You're welcome, Radha. Yes, Crystal, all this information is going to get emailed to you as well as the PowerPoint, okay? And there's a quick survey that I do ask you to take just to give me some feedback about the session tonight and anything else you'd like to see. Oh, they have art and history. Thank you. I knew I was missing something. Thank you. Oh, you're welcome. Okay, I'm going to stop the recording.